Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Risk Matrix with myself, Dr. Martin, and Mr. James Junkin. Hey, James.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, it was going pretty good until last night when the Alabama softball team lost.
Broke my heart.
I think it broke
Broke
all
my
our
heart.
hearts. Number one team in the country. I feel for those girls. Still love women's softball. Would love it more if Alabama was in the final, but it is what it is.
That's right. But what a championship run. I like sports and all the things that separate us. Sports unites us, you know. It unites us. And I really like women's softball, collegiate softball. Maybe not as much as football, but it's great seeing the teams and the spirit. And I thought the girls represented our state very well, and hats off not only to them, but all the teams that made
All the
the
teams.
regionals, the super regionals. It's a great sport if you're not following it. Man, y
Those ladies can
softball's
play.
come a long way. They can play. They're
Those
athletes by far.
those ladies, those D1 softball players can play, and I'll tell you what, I was out on a site today, talking to just a random bunch of guys and, had on my Alabama hat, and we got to talking, and they all watch women's softball, all of them. It's crazy. So we had a lot
Great.
to talk about.
That's great. That's outstanding.
So
Hey,
let's
something else we
Mhm.
need to talk about.
What's
May has been a terrible month for process safety. There have been incident after incident after incident involving things like contractor management, mechanical integrity, energy isolation, and the latest rip from our headlines involves, still missing victims from the Nippon Dynawave plant in Longview. Chemical tank explosion involving a chemical named white liquor which contains sodium hydroxide, sodium sulfide, and sodium carbonate, and it's used in the paper pulping process. And I don't know if you saw that, but it was a huge explosion. So typically, you see these things later in the year, right? When we're doing turnarounds, we've got outages going, extended maintenance periods, new contractors coming on board. We've looked at those type of incidents in the past, but really, in the month of May, several incidents that involved really dangerous chemicals. And what's surprising about these incidents is where these plants are located. They are in the middle of residential areas, schools, parks. The community is built up around them. So I would say, from a safety perspective, I think not only do we need to protect workers, we need to think about defending the fence line. I mean, we just had what in California, 50,000 residents had to be evacuated from their homes because of a runaway chemical reaction in a tank. Um, that they were afraid the temperature was going to rise and it was going to explode. So anyway, this incident um, from Washington out in Longview in Washington State, this paper mill explosion, uh, I think as many as 11 people have been killed.
Yeah, I think they've recovered the bodies now. But
Have they?
I think you made a really good point there, James. A lot of these facilities, and when I used to work in environmental in the environmental world, and doing all these kind of looking around the neighborhood to see what's going on, looking at who was having releases. I don't think people realize that we have built up around historic industry the way that we have, right? And that's what we're seeing now are these chemical explosions, tanks, facilities that are storing, boku chemicals, and they're sitting in the middle of residential neighborhoods, and they are old enough that there should have been, upgrades to a lot of these facilities. And I think that that's what we're seeing is, the mechanical integrity is failing. People aren't keeping up with their process safety, uh, their HAZOPs and looking at the systems like they should. And, these
Yeah,
things happen.
aging infrastructure is a huge problem. Um, I really think that speaks to the mechanical integrity, but when you think about how these chemical plants and businesses run, sometimes when you're talking about your risk register, I don't know everything that needs to be on the risk register is on the risk register when it relates to the community around them. Um, Perhaps the the risk register was done many years ago and infrastructure has grown up around it, like you've talked about. And we really haven't
Mhm.
considered what if this worst case scenario happens. But just in this past month, all right, you had the incident in Longview that we're talking about. You had the Levee incident in Garden Grove, California, where they had to evacuate the 50,000 people that were there in that incident. Then you had down here with us, and I used to live right across the street from this refinery. The Chalmette refinery had an explosion. Now, luckily, they were able to keep it within their fence line, but right across the street from this refinery, or is a high school, an elementary school. It's very much 60, 80,000 people live in this very close vicinity of this. And then in Hopewell, Virginia, in early part of May, you had pneumonia vapor release from a safety valve. Uh, that it just seems like there's a lot of that, and I probably missed a whole bunch, but it seems to be a lot of that in the month of May, which is an unusual time of the year to have it. And I don't know if that portends something more serious coming.
Well, let's hope not. I will say this. I mean, a lot of safety professionals or that are coming up in the field and programs that have safety programs that are educating safety professionals. They don't focus a lot on process safety, right? And process safety is a real defined expertise area um, for risk professionals, for risk and safety professionals. So I would encourage people who have jobs in these facilities to really take a look at the process safety regulations. Um, Try to find, if you're looking for uh, certification points, right? To look and do professional development. I think this is a real need area, and I think that people should be looking at it to increase their skills because I think some of that too is not knowing what you don't know.
And process safety from a standpoint of a regulation, you know, whether your facility is covered by OSHA's process safety management standard, which is 29 CFR 1910-119, or not, the principles are true for most organizations when it comes to safety management. If you go and look at the EPA's risk management program, which is sort of akin to OSHA's PSM. So if you have chemicals and you're not under uh, where your quantities are under the threshold from OSHA's PSM standard, there's a high likelihood that you need an EPA RMP. And really, there's not a dime's bit of difference between the two programs. If you look at SIMS in the offshore environment, again, not a dime's bit of difference between how SIMS handles safety from the offshore perspective as to OSHA's PSM. It's just a safety management system. And I think we have a lot to learn from process safety, whether we're regulated by it or not. Process safety is just good safety. And today, we're going to talk a lot about management of contractors and paper safety is not real safety, going back to our very first, very popular episode and topic. And part of that is thinking about processes, system safety. And I'm looking forward to our discussion
Yeah,
today. But we got to
the
keep them
do's
out.
and don'ts, and a lot of it is do you do it?
Do
I
you
know you
do
say
it?
you do it, but do you do it? Right. So
Do you
before
do
we
it?
do that, James, though, this is a really good topic, the process safety. But let's move a little bit towards some up and coming things because I know you have some stuff coming up on the horizon here, and so does Veriforce. And we want to make sure we get out the news because a lot of people are going to Safety 2026. Where is it this year?
Anaheim, LA. We're going out with the stars. It's going to be awesome, man. I love going to ASSP's conference. Longtime member, but I like to think of this almost like a revival, where we're getting together with a bunch of our friends, colleagues, people you only see on LinkedIn, going out to where we're all committed to one goal, which is bringing workers home safe and getting better. We've given tips on how to attend conferences and having a plan. And if you're still putting your plan together, I would encourage you. Hopefully, you'll still be there on June 17th, the last day. I'm at the tail end of the conference. I don't know how that worked out, but June 17th, 1:15 to 2:15, we're going to be talking about the ethics of safety, how integrity shapes safety climate in the oil and gas industry. But listen, if you are not in the oil and gas industry, these principles apply to you. We apply to you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that affects in pre-qualification. If you're a hiring client, think about what you're asking of your contractors. And really, are we getting honest data?
I was gonna say, it's what you're asking, James, but it's also what you're expecting, right? And
What
do
do you
your
expect?
what you're asking match what you're expecting for results, right? For integrity, for ethics, for participation, and all the things that, kind of go into that. So I
And we're
think
gonna
you're
get into that some. There's a big discussion about that, and I hear this all the time from contractors that have been scored similarly, and in reality, they're doing a lot more than the people down the road are doing, but there's no way to demonstrate that, but they're both scored the same in initial pre-qualification. So again, my session is number 7069. That's Ethics of Safety, How Integrity Shapes Safety Climate in the Oil and Gas Industry. And I will be there with our friends and sponsors of this podcast from Veriforce, baby. We'll be in the
Air Force has
expo
a big
hall.
old booth. What's
Big
Air
old
Force?
booth. Big old booth. 5411. 5411. And look, Sandra Cash, our president, will be there. We'll have a lot of members from the expert services team. Josh Ortega will be there. David Tibbetts, the chief safety officer from Highwire, will also be there. Chris Detier from the expert services team and one of our master trainers. He will be there as
A
well.
lot of
He's delivering
our
several
advisory
flags.
board.
Yes, and on our strategic advisory board, a lot of SAB members will be there. Come by the booth, shake our hands, come see us. Hey, I'm looking forward to seeing you at Safety 2026. We'll be there. Be there, be square.
Yeah, go see James Junkin at Veriforce booth. I'm sure he'll be hanging somewhere nearby if he's
Be
not in the
hanging
booth
out.
himself. So go visit.
Be
All
hanging
right,
out.
let's get into it, James. Let's talk about our main topic here. Our most listened to episode, most popular episode that we've done was number one. Okay, I think it was our number one episode, right? The first one we
Number
ever
one
did.
episode, our first episode ever.
Paper safe. Paper
Paper
safety is
safety is
not
not
safe.
real safety.
Right. So we're gonna do a riff on that, because we're sponsored by Veriforce, and I think this is something that Veriforce has taken up in addition to pre-qualification as something that actually helps you figure out, as you just mentioned, are people really doing what they say they're doing, and are people who are scored the same, let's say A rated or whatever the rating system is within whatever pre-qualification system that you're in, are all A-rated companies the same? And we both know from our professional practice that this is not true. That's just pre-qualification. Pre-qualification means you've submitted a bunch of things and you've met the criteria, whatever the criteria is. Sometimes it's based through the verification system, and sometimes it's based on things that contractors or you as a hiring client think is most important, right? But beyond that, James, and you do this. In fact, you put together some procedures for doing deep dive contractor assessments and how they help the pre-qualification and how they help uh, delineate between an A this person and an A that person. So why don't you take
Well,
us off on that?
you know, paper is important. Okay. Paper is important. In my opinion, you need to begin with a strong foundation, begins with a solid set of policies and procedures that govern your safety management system. What is it we're going to do? How are we going to do it? Who is going to be accountable for doing it? And how are we going to go back and check that, that, you know, improvements from a continuous improvement standpoint? That begins with solid policies and procedures. But just because I have good policies, just because I have good training documentation, a roster, an LMS printout, doesn't mean that it's being effective. And I see this all the time when we start talking about, well, I'm scored this in this system. So if I have this score, then obviously we have no improvements that can need to be made in our safety management system. And that's a misnomer. It's unfair to the pre-qualification system, and it's unfair especially to the workers that are out there on the ground. More and more, what we're seeing is people saying, okay, this is what you said you do. Can you prove the effectiveness of how you do it?
So let
Right?
me give you an analogy, right? So I see pre-qualification as, you know, you're looking for a job, you got the interview, right? The people who get the interviews are the ones that have done the pre-qualification, right? They've passed that first bar. But that's not the only bar when it comes to safe work. It's not the only bar when selecting the right subcontractor to do work on your site.
There you go.
It gets you in the door, it gets you the interview to or let's say it gets you the invitation to the dance, right? But the dance is where things happen. So what do you need to do to be that person who gets selected? Number one, I think people get selected, and they probably aren't the one that should get selected. So how do we deep dive into implementation? That's
Well,
the
that's a great question. That's a great question, and one it depends on what persona you're in. Are you in the hiring client persona, the contractor persona, or the contractor that's hiring the subcontractor persona? Because all have different perspectives, all have different roles, and frankly, all have different liabilities when it comes to OSHA enforcement and when it comes to potential litigation. So, hiring clients have to exercise reasonable care under the law. And a lot of the pre qualification that most people do is the beginning of that reasonable care standard. We're looking to see your lagging indicators. We're looking to see your past citation history, not just OSHA, other citation histories. We're looking to see are you financially able to handle a project? Do you have the resources to cash flow your payroll and for supplies and et cetera? What's your past experiences on other projects? All that goes into pre-qualification now, in selecting contractors. Then we've got into, do you have the right written programs? Do you have the right documentation of training? And I've seen evolution is getting more and more and more down to, what does the individual worker that's actually showing up on my site, what risk do they present? Like, are they actually trained? And I think Veriforce does a good
what was
job.
in the training?
Yeah,
What
what was in the
what was
training?
in the
See,
training,
it's
right?
just an evolution. It's kind of like my issue with lagging indicators. And we see this a lot. People have told me for years, James, you need to track lagging indicators. Okay, what you want me to track? Number of inspections done, number of training conducted, number of safety meetings. Okay, that's great. I've got all this data. I've tracked it. What does it mean?
Honestly,
What's the quality of it
yeah, I was
is
gonna
a
say,
better.
honestly, just because you can measure something, and I just did an article on this, just because you can measure something doesn't mean you should, right? Because if it adds no value in the end result, then you should be either counting something else or doing something else as a preventative measure to help your safety program, right? So here's an example, right? I see a lot of people with a policy that says we have a safety committee.
I
right?
see it.
When you do your deep dive contractor assessments, my guess is a lot of these people that say they have a safety committee either don't have one or they don't have an effective one. I would rather see a company not have a safety committee at all if it's not doing anything or if they're not doing it, right? Don't tell me you're doing it. I would rather have you, you know, buying safety equipment that means something or doing some other measure if it will help you be a better risk, a better risk for us to hire than telling me you have something that commonly people track, right? We have tailgates every day. I mean, so what?
Do you? Are they
Do
good?
do you?
Right?
Are they good? Are people learning anything? If they're not, I'd rather have you tracking something else or doing some other measure that helps lower my risk.
100% agree. So one of the things that Veriforce started and we've kind of continued and it's taken some different iterations. You mentioned our deep dive contractor assessment. Can you prove what you say you do? And we routinely find gaps in things like risk assessments, JHAs, JSAs, incident investigations, corrective actions, and training. And that's at the contractor level. At the subcontractor level, we see the same issues. We just see them more in greater detail. There are a lot more gaps. Sometimes all those things I listed are gaps in the subcontractor level. So, visibility and coming up with plans that actually help people. It doesn't take a very seasoned safety professional to point out things that are wrong. It takes a little bit of experience and education and knowledge to be able to help people correct those things. Because if they knew how to correct it, they would have already corrected. I've been very surprised at the number of people that score very well in certain pre-qualification systems. And then when you deep dive into them, their training is almost non-existent. Sometimes training is representative by read and sign. Okay. OSHA 100% is not accepting. I gave you the publication on bloodborne pathogens and you read it and you signed an
You
acknowledgement
said you
form.
said you
Not
said you understood
accepting
it,
that training.
right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've generated a bunch of paper, but paper is not real safety. Just the acknowledgement that you've had training doesn't mean that worker has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to go out there and to perform their job and perform their job safely. That's the true test.
Or that they know what's in that bunch of paper that they uploaded to meet a requirement, right?
Yeah.
There's having a great policy and procedure, and I've seen some really good ones uploaded into pre-qualification systems.
You write a lot of
Well, and I love those policies and procedures, but if you're not doing what's in there, I would rather see what you're doing so that we can either improve it or bring it up to that standard that you say you're working towards, right? Because just uploading something and saying you're doing the gold standard of XYZ, um, that's not
it doesn't
safe.
do any good if you're not following it. It's like going to the doctor and getting all this advice, right? I went to the doctor, got all this advice. I know what I'm supposed to do and then never following it. It's like hiring an attorney and getting legal advice and then not following it, right? So that's what happens when you have a good set of policies and procedures. It provides you a roadmap to safe work, but you actually have to implement those things that you say you're doing. And surprisingly, I found significant gaps in just about every assessment that I've done over the last 5 years. And one of the largest ones is training. Just because you have a certificate, just because you have a roster, just because you have a printout from an LMS that has the name of the topic, confined space, lockout, tag out, whatever at the top of it, does not mean it meets the expectations of OSHA when it comes to training for authorized workers or qualified workers or competent workers.
Let's dive right into that, like, on our theme of deep diving, right? Let's dive right in on the training thing. When you do a deep dive contractor assessment, what does it mean to look at somebody's training?
The first thing we want to do is examine that against OSHA publication 2254, which is kind of like a cheat sheet, right? So OSHA's training expectations are all within the standards. But to make it easier, OSHA published a, a PDF called OSHA Publication 2254, which is training requirements in OSHA standards. And thankfully, it lists all the training requirements from all the standards, including agriculture, maritime standards, general industry, and construction. There is you and I and Chris Kuiper uh, from the Air Force ASAB wrote a white paper on this very topic a few years ago about the differences in training between awareness level training, competency-based training, and professional development, right? And I think there is this huge misnomer and misunderstanding between what awareness level training is and what competency-based training is. And what I see is a lot of awareness level training being conducted, particularly online through whatever provider, in place of competency-based training. So they go and say, hey, my workers need to be trained in lockout tagout. So they take a course that's 2 minutes and 56 seconds long and believe that I'm not making that up, that actually happened. And we've got workers with that training out, locking and tagging out in hydrous ammonia lines.
But
That is
even
not
so,
defensible.
let's get past the 2 minutes and 56 seconds, right? Let's say it's an hour training in lockout tagout online, right? And it covers all kinds of lockout tagout stuff. Competency-based training, ha it has a couple components, right? It has does does the information in there meet the level of what you're expected to do on the job, right? So this is one thing that I talk to my clients about a lot. It's one thing to document that you did the training, but it's another thing to document what's in the training, okay? And then the third piece is, are you looking at how they're going to put this training to use in your work environment and in what situations? And have they been checked that they
There you
understand
go.
how to lock out that anhydrous ammonia line, right? Because that's the one thing that they do,
100%.
right? So competency-based training is is it required by OSHA? Yes. Okay. Have you looked at what's in that training? Obviously 2 minutes and 56 seconds isn't going to cover a whole heck of a lot, but an hour might cover quite a lot of information,
Want to be it.
right? But can you apply that training to what you're asked to do in the actual work environment, right? And this is something that I know that a lot of Air Force courses do. They have the training, and then there's a competency checklist, right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of times the competent person or somebody higher up in the company that has more experience in an area will have to check the competency of that worker to put on, take off a harness, to ensure that they can uh, find the right anchor point, that they can put on their respirator. The respiratory program administrator has to know that they could put on and take off a respirator, that they know the hazards of their environment. So these are, there's much more than just picking a training. It's knowing what's in the training, making sure it covers the right things, and then can they apply the training to what is required in their work environment.
In OSHA, that's the true test. And that's how they determine. You've got all this documentation, but when they go interview with the employee and the employee cannot answer questions related to the hazards related to their job and how they're going to control those hazards, if they don't know, for example, when it comes to HAZCOM, they need to be able to communicate what the physical and health hazards are and how they're going to protect themselves and where to locate a safety data sheet and where to find pertinent information like emergency response on the safety data sheet the right PPE on the safety data sheet. That's what we're talking about when we come to competency-based training. So yes, you can use some out of the box type training as initial, but when we're talking about exposing workers to chemicals, you have to train them on the physical and health hazards and how you're going to protect them. That's an add on that makes them competent, right? There's refresher training. Numerous standards require refresher training. Uh, Respiratory protection. One I see missed all the time is fire extinguisher training. You know, the
The
question
annual.
says, do you do question says on the pre-qual, do you do fire extinguisher training? Yes, we do it. But then when we go assess it, we find out not only was the initial training PowerPoint only, and this requires a hands-on component if workers are expected to use the fire extinguisher, right? There's also an annual refresher training that's required. The same thing's true for respiratory protection. So, if you're listening to us, one of the things I think you need to do as a safety professional is look at what is it my workers are exposed to, what training's required by OSHA. Now, I want you to hear me. Not what my hiring client requires me to do. Okay? What training is required by OSHA? Because I hear this all the time, Doc. But my hiring client doesn't require me to do fire extinguisher training. My hiring client doesn't require me to have this policy. They don't require. Look, every MSA that's ever been written says you will abide by all federal, state, and local regulations.
That's right.
OSHA is the law, so you're expected to follow by this.
And I'm gonna tell you
They
what, if you have
come
to use that fire extinguisher and you haven't been trained, they're gonna point right at that MSA.
right at it. If it's available and they have an opportunity to use it, and I see it a lot of times where you got fire extinguishers in trucks. There's not an inspection process. There's no training. There's no refresher training because there was no initial training to begin with. So if you want to move beyond paper safety, where you said, yes, I do these things, you need to sit down and think about what is it my workers do? And if I was asked today to prove it, could I? From a training standpoint. Now, if I'm a contractor, here's the question you should ask. When I hire this subcontractor, how do I know that the workers that are coming from that subcontractor have been trained to do their job and to do it safely beyond awareness level training? And I am finding significant gaps. And you know where we're finding them? When OSHA comes in after a fatality investigation. And the hiring client's looking at the contractor saying, you hired these people, we hired you. What do you mean these folks don't have any training? Well, I thought we had this contract that said they were going to train their workers. And I've just been through multiple of these in the last 2 years in this contractor subcontractor relationship. So you have to move beyond paper safety. Paper safety is not simply getting a contract that says the people we're hiring are going to abide by the law. It's exercising some due diligence, and training has been one that at least 96% of the assessments we do, we find some serious training gap. I'm not talking about administrative training where, we're supposed to inform you of this, like access to medical records. You're supposed to do that annually, and they didn't do it. That's an administrative one. I'm talking about confined space, lockout, tag out, fire watch training, hot work, serious, serious high risk activities that we can't prove that we did train. But it's
So
not just training.
let's move on to some other things that I mean. So training is one of the things that you find in a deep dive. What else? What else should people be looking for in a deep dive for
Are
implement?
you truly are you truly investigating incidents and coming with corrective actions? And I want to say this to all hiring clients. You have to create an organizational culture outside of just your company into your supply chain, into your contractor network, where there's not punitive actions, perceived or real, for reporting near misses. Okay. You have to understand that people make mistakes. Human beings make mistakes. What I want to see
Fail.
is systems fail. Okay. That we have created an organizational culture, if you will, where we can come together to find true causal factors and put true corrective actions in place. Most of the incident investigations that we review, the the investigation stops at the worker didn't follow the proper procedure, and almost exclusively the corrective action is we're going to retrain the worker. So my point is, if that's truly the only root cause, and you keep having these incidents and we keep having to retrain the workers, you ought to be questioning whether your training is effective to begin with. It's probably because we're giving workers 2 minutes and 56 seconds worth of lockout tagout training, brother.
Well, or we're
That
not
might be
checking,
part of the
even if they
causal
have an
factor.
hour, we're not checking that they can apply the training to real world situations.
So I don't want to push one investigation methodology over another, but you need to adopt an investigation methodology, meaning you need to have a systematic approach to investigations that look beyond just the actions of the worker. We've said that many, many, many times. Now, that's not to absolve the worker of any accountability, but let's look at the effectiveness of training. Let's look at the tools that we gave the worker. Let's look at how we examined the hazards before we went to the job to determine whether or not these could be controlled using OSHA's hierarchy of control. Because it's too late once we get to the job site to start implementing elimination, substitution, engineering controls, right? You're going to get me fired up because I'm passionate about this. And I'm about to say something, and I'll hear about it out in Anaheim, but I don't care. I don't know that this focus on SIF, PSIF is a really good idea. Okay.
You wanna
Yes,
get me
total,
fired up too?
yes, total recordable injury rates are not predictive. Okay. They're not predictive. And the same things that cause those type injuries rarely lead to your serious injuries and fatalities. But I don't think we can just totally disregard that. You know, Josh Ortega's got an article fixing to come out. I was talking to him this morning about this. He's the VP of HSE and procurement at Veriforce. He's got an interesting thought. What's costing us money are these total recordables injury rates, these knick-knack injuries, these things that are not serious, these things are not fatalities. They're the vast bulk of that. And if we start ignoring these, are we not sweeping the precursors to system defects under the rug? And then we end up having a serious injury, and then we end up having a fatality. So I don't think that we need to think about TRR as predictive of the future, but I also don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. It is a data point, and people do get hurt,
You're gonna be
right?
super popular out there at that conference.
Yeah, come on with it. Because I go back and look at what actually kills people, and it's not all these explosions that we're seeing. That's the rarity. What kills people is basic OSHA 10, OSHA 30 compliance. You and I've looked at this, right? It's basic stuff. We're in an excavation. We don't have a trench box. We're working under a suspended load. The machine doesn't have guards. We're working on it while it's energized and the belt's running. It's the same things year after year after year, and you reveal it in the OSHA top 10. The OSHA top 10 is the same things year after year after year. So my advice is, if you want to move from paper safety to real safety, you need to look at your training. Okay. You need to look at your hazard identification process. It's one thing to have a JHA. It's another thing to have good JHAs. Most JHAs, JSAs I look at aren't worth the paper they're written on. Why? How much time have we spent
And
coaching people on how to write a
and
good JSA?
and who wrote it? And who wrote it,
And
right?
who wrote it? And did we review it before we got going, right? And
Do
then when
they
we have
actually look at them in the
incidents,
field? I can tell you, can't even tell you how many times I go to a site and I ask if they've ever seen the JHA and they said the JH what?
yeah, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's in the back of the safety
Yo, you
plan.
mean the sign-in sheet, doc. You mean the sign-in sheet. Yeah, yeah, I signed it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And all of this becomes evidence in an OSHA investigation or in a wrongful death or a gross negligence type litigation after everything, because it all comes out at that point. It is what it is. I'm trying to avoid getting to that point, right? So if you want to move beyond paper safety, one, look at your policies. See, do you do what you say you do? One of them I like to look at all the time is respiratory protection because the standard requires, so in the policy, it'll contain that the company report a respiratory protection program administrator that is qualified by training or experience that is commensurate with the complexity of the company's respiratory protection program, right? And then most policies say that person's going to be my HSE director, my safety director. Sometimes they call them out by name. When I do the assessment, a lot of times the person who's named in there, at least by title, is shocked to learn that they're the respiratory protection program administrator,
Or they don't work there anymore.
or they don't even work there anymore, or that title doesn't exist within the chain of command, right? So look at your policies. Do you do what you say you do? Look at your training. Make sure your training's meeting what is an OSHA publication 2254 from a content standpoint. Have knowledge, skills, and ability checks where people demonstrate competency in whatever area that they have to demonstrate competency, right? Documentation for that. Have good incident investigations that follow out corrective actions. If you do that, you'll start moving from paper safety to real safety.
Agreed. And
We'll
I just
start
want to
bringing people.
add, James, because I know this is kind of your area of expertise, right? You do this with Veriforce a lot. Um, I would encourage, if you're listening and you're curious and maybe you have a little extra budget this year, next year, whenever it comes up, that you look at doing an audit of some of your processes. Maybe not all if you can afford to do all your processes, then great. Or some of your do a deep dive. Hire somebody to do a deep dive, a consultant, or James does them with Veriforce. And have somebody come in and say, really look at, are you doing what you say you're doing, right? And it'll be eye opening and probably in a good way, right? These are things that you can work on over time. So, I encourage people to really take a look, see if you can fit it in and do some of these. If you can't do a deep dive on everything, do a deep dive on something. So
Do it. Hey, in response to incidents or high spend, high risk activities. The differences in what we do is we're going to not only point out what the gaps are, we're going to tell you how to close those gaps. It's one thing to tell somebody you need to do training on lockout, tagout. But if you don't know what needs to go in that training, it's not very helpful, is it?
if you're a hiring client and you have a high risk project or you have a project that means a lot to you and has a high visibility with the public or with somebody or a person that's hiring you, that's something that you can do a deep dive just on a project to make sure that your subcontractors are doing what they say they're doing. So I don't want to beat this to death, James, because I know we're going to have another episode here coming up next week while you're at the conference, while you're
Hey,
getting beat up over SIF, PSIF, because that'll have to be an episode of its own when you come back. We can talk about the tunnel vision that safety professionals get on certain things, and you'll probably be subjected to that at the conference. The tunnel vision of SIF, PSIF, and some of the other ideas that people like to throw around. But don't lose sight of the broad base of safety. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think that's a
right.
really good message. So why don't you give us another shout out of where you're going to be at the conference, James, and the Veriforce booth?
Hey, hey, look, I'm going to be at Veriforce booth number 5411. Veriforce booth 5411. Come by and see us at the expo. There are several different flash sessions that the Veriforce team will be having. Krista T.A. be doing some. I think Josh Ortega's doing some. We're introducing several speakers, so the entire Veriforce team will be out there. Come check me out June 17th, 1:15 through 2:15. Hey, if you like this conversation, you're going to love what I got to say about ethics and safety and how integrity shapes safety climate in the oil and gas industry, which applies to everything else. So, look, I'm looking forward to seeing all of our friends out there. Um, Thank you to our friends who are not going to make it. For our loyal listeners here on the Risk Matrix, we do this for you. If you want to show some love, hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that comment button. Hey, we're over on Spotify, we're on YouTube, we're on Apple Podcast, we're on Substack, we are on LinkedIn, we're everywhere you get your podcast. So this is a cool thing. Hey, while you're on that flight out there to Anaheim, download some of these risk matrices. Your mama wants you to listen to them. Roll Tide, baby. Until
Roll
next time, y'all keep bringing workers home safe from these high hazard jobs. We'll see you on the outside of ASSP 2026. Doc Martin,
Roll Tide.
out.